title of the presentation. I'm really happy anybody showed up because there's a lot of really big sessions going on right now. So thank you for coming. Oh, do I know how to advance this? Yes. So Oregon State University is, we have approximately 28,000 full-time students and one main campus, which is in Corvallis, Oregon, in the Willamette Valley. And we have 2 satellite campuses in Bend and Newport. The Cascades campus in Bend just became a 4-year college in last fall, so fall of 2016, and we provide Canvas for them as well. So we do that campus and this. Newport houses the Hatfield Marine Center. There's not really teaching that goes on there. It's more research, so we don't per se have courses that are offered at Hatfield. We initially adopted Canvas in January 2015, and we're fully transitioned by January of 2016. We were one of those universities who had kind of the luxury of transitioning from Blackboard over an entire year. So it was, you know, first term, we rolled out volunteers, and then second term, we kind of twisted some arms until we were finally transitioned after a year. And we have over 10,000 courses a year taught in Canvas. There are more courses, like some of the presentations have said, we have some laggard faculty who don't really use Canvas yet, and with some of the help of things I learned today, maybe I can work on that. In addition to that, we're a Land, Sea, Sun, and Space Grant University, and some of you here may be also land grant universities. And that means we also have the responsibility of providing some forms of community education. And that includes things like, if you've ever heard of your county extension agent, we may have courses where they teach people how to test the pH of their soil, or how to prevent mud in your pastures, and that kind of thing. We also have volunteers who work at our research stations, and so they're not employees either, and they fall in this bunch. Right now, we have 154 active courses being taught that are non-credit, and over almost 4,500 unique user accounts who are not Oregon State accounts. So we had to do something about that. And we have to enroll. Some people are university users who are in those students, those courses, but we have to enroll these non-university students. Right, this is a good place to mention this. When we decided to transition to Canvas, we decided not to have any local Canvas logins. It was just a university-wide decision. We had identity management people sort of revamping the way we did identity management at OSU, and they just thought that that was a difficult way to keep track of the users that you have. In our previous LMS, we did have a way that people could just go to Blackboard and create themselves an account. And that was useful in some ways, but it was so out of control. If a password needed to be reset, they would try to figure out who to talk to, and it would be me, and I would have to reset it for them. And there were no controls over password strength. There was no confirmation of email. They just put it in an email. There wasn't a confirmation step to verify that that was valid. And I mean, if they ask me to change their password, I might make it change me, and it might stay change me for the rest of time. So there were a lot of problems with having that kind of account in our system at all. So how about using social logins? I mean, almost everybody has a social login now. Including AOL. You'd be surprised, we have over 100 AOL accounts now. But we had to do something, and we couldn't just create a whole infrastructure of guest accounts and managing all that. That was just not on. So we thought we'd go with social logins. And what we did is we got an identity provider proxy service. The one we chose after checking some out was Cirrus Identity. And they use SAML to authenticate social logins on our behalf. I'll give a lot more detail on this in a second. The benefit is it's completely transparent to the user. The user doesn't have to enter a lot of extra information when they log in. It just looks like they're logging into Canvas, and they just, it's not a big deal for them. There's a unique login URL for each social provider. So there's a Facebook login, there's a Twitter login, there's a Google login, and so forth. And we don't have to do any of the password and account management. That is, if they don't remember their Facebook password, they better get in touch with Facebook, because I can't help them. So the way we set that up with this social gateway is if you've done any authentication, everybody has at least one authentication server in Canvas. So most people have single sign-on. You've gone into the authentication pane and you filled in whatever were the correct parameters to get that set up. Ours is SAML. A lot of people use SAML. This is just additional SAML authentications. So you go into the authentications page, you go choose a provider, choose an authentication service, you choose SAML, and then Cirrus, the social gateway we're using, they told us what attributes we needed for those SAML logins. And then when that's all configured, you have a unique institution-specific URL. So it's it's oregonState.instructure.com/login/SAML, and then a unique number that nobody else knows outside of the institution. And this is what the form looks like that you fill in. And this is only what the admin sees. When I did a run-through of this, people were like, your users have to fill that out? No, no, no. The users never see any of this. This is just what the authentication, the SAML authentication in Canvas looks like for the admin. And you don't need to fill in everything. And, Cirrus just told us what we needed to use. It's a very standard thing to use the eduperson principal name. And up at the very top, it says you can log in directly with this provider by going to /login/SAML/ and there's a number there that I blurred out because that's the actual URL. Yeah. Now, user account creation. This doesn't happen automatically. We had to have an external process to create these accounts in Canvas. Otherwise, they just try to connect with the social provider, and Cirrus authenticates them, but Canvas says you don't have an account. So the folks who were using this had to create an external process. What it basically does is if you were to, I always use Facebook because it's an easy example. That Facebook login URL exists. So if you knew what that was and you tried to log in, it would give you an error. In that error is the identifier that Facebook uses that we will use for a login ID. Facebook doesn't use your email. Google doesn't use your email. A few of them do, Yahoo, I think, and AOL, but we couldn't count on that. So the registration process, the student goes in and chooses a social provider, and behind the scenes, the registration process attempts a login as that person and gets that error. Then they just take the error, which I'm going to show you here in just a second, and then they create the user using that as the login ID. And this is what that page looks like. So if you took that URL and tried to log in, it would just say, you don't have an account, and this would be your the ID number that Facebook uses internally. And users of Facebook don't have any way to access that number. So it's not like you can say, well, I'll create you an account, just tell me your ID number. That's not available to them. But we just have that registration process that goes out and gets it. So that's back where we were. And then it uses that ID that we found in the error to create the user in Canvas. And I can do this manually. When I was first getting this set up, I wanted to get a few test users, and I'd say, well, just go take this URL and try it, and then send me a screenshot of the error you got. And they'd send me the screenshot, and then I could manually create an account with that login ID. So it's not super tricky. And this is the discovery page that those folks have to go to choose how they're logging in. We have Google and Yahoo larger because after a while we realized that they were the predominant logins, which was kind of a surprise to me. Yahoo? And in amongst there, you can also see the OSU login because they can use their official OSU login to log in there. Ignore the Oregon Department of Revenue. If I have time at the end of this, I can tell you about that. That's a slightly different story. So we've had that since fall of 2015. It's working really well. We got all those 4,500 users in there. They use it all the time, and that worked great. But then in 2016, it seems to me like it was summer of 2016, Instructure introduced Canvas third-party authentication. I'm like, oh my God, here's these social logins. I could have done it with that. And in fact, you can. You can do a very similar thing, and it has the advantage of just-in-time provisioning. So you don't have that create the user account bit that you have to do. And they support almost the same bunch of social providers as Cirrus does. Not identical, but the big ones. The big ones are all in there. I was very excited to see the just-in-time provisioning. So this is how you do that. Again, you go into authentication, you choose a service provider, and this time, Facebook is one of your choices. And you just take Facebook. The login attribute from one social provider to the next may be different. For Facebook, it's ID. Usually whatever comes up by default, just keep that because that's what's going to work correctly. And there's that just-in-time provisioning. You just check that box, and when the first time that person logs in, they will automatically have an account created in your Canvas instance. Now, if you just did it like this, it wouldn't really be very convenient because that user wouldn't have any identifying attributes except their Facebook ID number, which they don't even know. So that wouldn't be great. So we're going to add some federated attributes. Right. You click the plus attribute button. And the best ones to use are email, surname, and given name, which is email, last name, and first name. And then when they go through this process, they attempt to log in. It goes off to Facebook to do the authentication, and it also retrieves the first name, the last name, and the email. So now, when your user gets created, they're going to have all these attributes, and they won't just have some blank ID number that's, not very sortable and stuff like that. Right, so. And there are other attributes you can add. I haven't found any advantage in doing that, so I've just gone with first name, last name, and email. Right, so how does just-in-time provisioning work? Which I probably just explained. Anyway, in authentications, you will find the URL for the authentication servers, which you need to look in authentications to see what this is. But for every institution, it's actually institutionname.instructure.com/login/Facebook/login/Google, and so on and so forth. And it's the same for everyone. Right, getting ahead of myself again. And then when you're done, because you set up those federated attributes, someone like Lindy Facebook goes and creates an account, and all the right stuff is filled in. Not only do you have first and last name, but Canvas does the right thing and creates the full name, display name, and sortable name as well. And it populates your email address, and you have like a full-featured account now in Canvas. So one of the concerns I have and why we're still not using this is that the URL is the same for every institution. I actually tried guessing another institution where I knew people. And I'm like, well, I wonder if they've got this turned on. I'm just going to try it. And they didn't. But if somebody did have it turned on, say we did, say Oregon State. If you just went to oregonstate.instructure.com/login/Facebook, Every Facebook in the world could make an account. And there's nothing you can do to hide that URL. You can't configure it. It's super easy to guess. And there's not like a check, like, oh, I approve this account, or I don't, or what. They just have accounts because you have just-in-time provisioning. But they're not enrolled in any courses. So is that really a problem? I mean, you know, you don't want to get 1 million users in your system, even if they can't do anything. But they really can't do anything when all they have is an account. They're just there in case someone wants to enroll them in something, then they have that availability. Now, we don't allow instructors to enroll students in their credit courses. But in our non-credit courses, that's how enrollment is done. So they would certainly have the ability to do that. And I can't really think of any other concerns, because once I convinced myself, don't worry about it, they're not enrolled anywhere. I mean, you know how it is. There's nowhere you can go in Canvas when you have a class. You can look at your profile, you can change your display name if that's a possibility at your institution, but they really can't do anything. So other than cluttering up your Canvas, I'm not sure what the big problem would be. But there is another way. So with the social gateway that we already had set up, we can also turn on just-in-time provisioning, because now Canvas provides that. So we're taking the stuff we did before this third-party authentication came along, but we're able to use the features that Instructure provided as well. You want to be really careful, or we needed to be really careful, to turn on provisioning only. And I'll tell you why in just a second. And it provides a much less guessable URL. I mean, it's a number, but it's a number that only we know. And so, you know, it's not just log in Facebook and there you go. So when you're doing the attributes in our SAML installation through the social gateway, they're different. This is what it looked like for the native Facebook, the native Canvas just-in-time provisioning. But those provider attributes don't work. So we had to get these from our provider. Those are called protocol-specific attributes, but they're not that hard to find. And then this is the checkbox for provisioning only. So what that means is the first time someone logs in, get all this stuff, populate the information, their name, their email, but only do it that once. If they log in again, you're not going to monkey around with it. Anything else of interest on that? I can't think of anything. So here's the thing about protocol level name versus the friendly name. The friendly name is when you say last name, first name, email. And it's really convenient that Instructure has set it up so you can use the friendly name, because it means something to you and me. But it's easy to get the protocol level names too. Here is a website that'll take you to the complete description of those. And also our social gateway provider told us which ones to use. And as I said, with the just-in-time provisioning, with the Canvas native stuff, the display name and sortable name are created automatically. So why are we doing provisioning only? Well, this was pretty interesting. It seems like it'd be nice to update that on every login. Suppose you've got your AOL account and you get married and you change your last name. You go into AOL, you change your last name. You would like it to show up everywhere that use it, including Canvas. But because we have these users that are populated by our registration system, which we're required to have because there's also a payment piece. So they go and they register for a class and they say, this is my first and last name and email. And then they go and they pay a fee. And then those user accounts are created by a different process. We get a CSV file, it's uploaded into Canvas, and they have the name that they want to have in the class. Sometimes they need to have an official name, and maybe in Facebook they're like Lady of Darkness. And they need to have their real official name in this course because it's something like continuing education, because they're an EMT. So they need to have what that is. What happens if you don't turn on provisioning only, and you can guess how I found this out, is even those users who were created by this registration process, the next time they log in, it changes their information. And I found out because one gal contacted me, and on, I don't think it was Facebook, I think it was Google Mail, and she said, all of a sudden in Canvas, my name is spelled backwards. And I looked at her Google account, and that's how she has it. And you know, people like to obscure their names for various reasons. So I figured out pretty quickly how to change everybody's names back to what they were registered with and turned on provisioning only. I kind of have mixed feelings. I wish we didn't have to do it that way, but until we don't have this sort of mixed world, we're going to be stuck with it. Because what we want to do in the near future is we now want to make it possible for people to create these sort of guest accounts in our Canvas installation so they can be in things that are not these non-credit courses they pay for, but we have other non-credit courses that are not exactly courses. They may be clubs. They may be different kinds of participation. As a land-grant university, we have a lot of committees that do various kinds of governance. And oftentimes, like we have an animal safety, we have a veterinary medicine school, we have an animal safety board, and they're required to have a chairman of the board who is not at OSU. So she's not going to go pay and go through this crazy registration system. So I can turn on just-in-time provisioning for these social providers in parallel with that registration system, as long as I do provisioning only. And then there may be some slight support effort when someone says, I got married, or I changed my name, or I'm a different gender and I go by a different name now. And you know, there'll be but it'll be minuscule, and then I'll just have to manually make those changes. Okay, it's not perfect. So it does require that separation process, but like I said, it's not all bad because we have to find a way for them to pay anyway. So they have a whole complex thing, and they get their names, and the name has to match what's on the credit card, and so that's not horrible. It does require a separate URL for every social provider. And when we have this mix of these people who went through this registration system, and when we eventually deploy the other social logins, there's a specific URL they have to go to, and it's different for each social provider. So, for example, if you register for a course and you sign up with your Facebook account, and then you don't start it for a month, and you go back and you're like, did I sign up with Google? I'll just try Google. They're not in there. That would not be the same account. And you can't take the Google and Facebook account and merge them. I mean, technically, you can merge user accounts in Canvas, but it would be really difficult to, in a foolproof way, decide that those are really the same person. So you got that. And the other problem is our base URL, OregonState.Instructure.com, doesn't work for any of them. And that's kind of intentional, but it is a pain, because if they forget, so they register for a course and they get an email and it says, here's where you log in. Or they can go to that discovery page I showed earlier and they can pick which social provider they're using. But if they just forget and they're like, oh, I don't know, and then they Google Oregon State Canvas, they're going to get this URL and it's just not going to work for them. It's going to fail authentication. So every once in a while we get questions about that. And every once in a while we have Tier 1 Canvas support, and every once in a while they get questions about it. And they're like, we have no idea what you're talking about. So that's kind of a drawback. And what we would like to be able to do someday is unify the social login with an official OSU account. Maybe somebody comes along through an extension course and they take some type of botany, or something like that. And then they're like, I love this so much, I'm going to become a student at OSU, and I'm going to do horticulture. Well, we don't have any way currently, although we are working on it, to unify that social login with an OSU account, so we can say, oh, while that doesn't count for credit, we can see that you have experience in this botany class, and maybe you can jump over a prerequisite for a horticulture class or something like that. So that's something that we're still working on, because I think that would be really important to get. And the discovery. Due to a decision at the very high levels at OSU, the discovery of these social logins is not on the main login page. I mean, we could have it set up so OregonState.Instructure.com just went to a discovery page that had buttons for all these social logins and one for Oregon State. But the edict was, we primarily serve our 28,000 4-credit students, and they should not have to be confused or find their way around. So the discovery is not on the standard login page. You can see the pros and cons of that. And believe it or not, social logins are not great for everyone. We still have, especially the rural population, and they say, well, I just have my ISP that's out in the country somewhere. It's, BendOregon.com. And we don't have any way to help them. We have links on the discovery page that says, well, go use one of these. And one of the reasons Facebook is not one of the top choices is because, as probably all of you know, Facebook asks for rather a lot of information. And there are many places where you're like, do I check, don't give them this information, or do get, So we didn't sort of make them one of the preferred providers, because something like Google Mail or Yahoo or even AOL is a lot more friendly in terms of not asking for too much information. So how much time do I have, timekeeper? Okay, I can move on to the extra thing I have just quickly. So then we had another little twist. We have the government of the state of Oregon, specifically the Department of Revenue, wanted our non-credit folks to create some courses for them, for training for the department. That's basically the tax man. So they have all kinds of compliance training they need to do. They weren't happy with what they had going on. So they asked our non-credit folks to create some training for them. But they're required to use their official email address. They're not allowed to use social logins at all at work. I mean, you can't log into Facebook or check your Gmail or anything. And they're absolutely required to do these courses using an official email address. So, okay, that didn't fit either of the other two scenarios we already had set up, but we need to get them into Canvas so they can take these compliance trainings. So what we did is we added another identity provider. And at first they're like, just add an identity provider. And I'm like, oh my God, I don't know how to do that. But it's not really that hard. The hardest part was getting the guy on the Oregon.gov side to give me the correct information. So you just need the identity ID of the identity provider, the entity ID, the login URL, which is just the URL where their people log in, and a login attribute. EPPN, the EduPerson principal name, is predominantly used, but they were using name ID. So, thank you. So I happily went with name ID. And an identifier format, in this case it was an email address, that was easy to do. And a certificate fingerprint. Now the guy at Oregon.gov had no idea what that was. I didn't know what his certificate fingerprint was. So he just sent me his X509 certificate. Whoops. Okay, just too much clicking. And I figured out that you can get the certificate fingerprint by deriving it out of the X509 certificate. I think there's probably an OpenSSL command that you could do that with, but even my identity management guy at OSU couldn't figure that out. So, but at this website, and it's perfectly legit to take this website and paste in an X509 certificate because that's the public certificate. So you're not like, breaking any rules by doing that. And there's an option there to just get the certificate fingerprint. So yay. So we set that up, and now anybody with an Oregon.gov login can log into our Canvas system. Well, no, they still have to create the accounts, and there is no just-in-time provisioning for that. But so far it's been like 18 people. And the people providing the training just had to create a CSV file for me to create that. So yeah, that was a fun thing to discover. And since we're a land, sea, space, and sun grant university, I couldn't resist mentioning that in this, our 150th year, we're having a total eclipse. We're going to be in the path of totality on August 21st, so we're pretty excited about that. It's like right on our anniversary. So, yep, that's what's happening at OSU. It's going to be crazy. We have a population of like 56,000, and they're expecting 400,000 people to come visit, just because the path of totality is very narrow. And that's it. So just, oh, thank you. So are there any questions? I know this was a lot of kind of, I don't know, super technical stuff, but maybe it was useful, and I'd love to answer any questions.
Is there a way for you as an administrator to kick out a list of all these people who have signed up on their own?
It's interesting. You actually can, and it's pretty easy. There's not a straightforward way I know of to just get a list of everybody. But if you go in as an admin and you've got the user box, if you search on @google.com, all of the Gmail users get listed. At Facebook.com, that's why I know that we have over 100 AOL users, because I was like, is anybody using that? But yeah. So you just put it in the user search box, and you can find, and it doesn't give it back to you in a way that's easily exportable, so you can blop it into an Excel spreadsheet or anything, but you can get the information.
Your extension programs, I know it's a little bit different, but how do you avoid duplicate enrollments? So if you have a SIS student who signs up for an extension course, and can they also log in with their social? Does that count towards your FTE? How do you avoid that duplication?
I do not know how it counts toward the FTE. We have advised Instructure that we're doing this, and then they deployed this tool that lets anybody turn on social logins. So I don't know what their position is on FTEs. The non-credit courses that we teach, we specifically ran that by them during the contract phase, and they were like, yeah, that's fine, they're part of your students.
Do you conclude those? Like, are they in set terms, like your regular terms?
They're not in set terms the same way. They're managed by the folks that teach the classes. Our 4-credit courses are really locked down. We create the course shell. The instructor can't add any students. They can conclude the courses, but they're mostly term concluded. But these, we give the non-credit folks a lot more flexibility. We've created a teacher-like role where they can add people, and they don't create the course sites themselves. They just request them in a semi-automatic way we have. So, and I forgot the first part of your question.
That answered it.
Okay.
If they have set terms and you lock them down, but you don't allow the instructor in the extension course to conclude the course.
Correct.
Or it may be open indefinitely.
And it may be open indefinitely, and some are. And what instructors do in that case is they'll actually delete students. They also have that capability. Or they'll conclude students. And that's just up to them. It's up to them how they want to handle it. Some of them just conclude the students because they actually want students to continue to have access to those materials, even though their session of it is over.
And those, the extension courses never count for credit, right?
Never. Although, you think about it, and after a while, I don't know.
We offer that, but that's a separate SIS import, and it's a separate sheet
Right.
just for the 4 credit that are locked to the term.
Right.
Same instructor, same.
Pretty similar, yeah. Yes.
Do you have any situations for your 4-credit courses where there are external volunteers, maybe experts in the field, that are assisting a professor through either reviewing assignments, for example, or things of this nature? And if so, do do they use the social login, or how do you set them up?
At this time, our 4-credit courses are not allowed to have anyone except official OSU logins in them. And this is one of the reasons we're looking at these social logins for sort of a guest account. So there would be a way that it would have to be done by an administrator, but then I could put someone with a social login in a credit course when the department has said this is someone who's a member of the, an expert in the field, and they're going to be a guest lecturer and whatnot. So that's why I would like us to move forward and use the social logins in other ways. Back here.
Do you have the cost for the service?
You know, we got it really cheap, so I wouldn't count on getting it this cheap. It's only costing us $10,000 a year. That seems cheap to me. And you had a question?
Yeah, so we have a lot of the local logins already with like Gmails or for other universities. If you use the social login, would somebody who already has an account created in our Canvas systems be able to log in with using the Gmail button? Does that make sense?
It does. It totally makes sense. And I think it would. It would depend on how their local Canvas login was created with the Gmail, because the Gmail address for email is not their login ID. Or maybe it is. So the login ID for Gmail, in order for Google to do the authentication, if you're still happy doing the authentication, it wouldn't matter. But if you want Google to do the authentication and use the Instructure feature, you would have to use the Google ID, which would, as I was saying, can be retrieved by that arcane method of letting them run into an error. But I don't know any other way to fetch the Google ID other than that.
So how do you share like the social login page? It's like you said, it's not on like the main Oregon Instructure page.
Right. So the non-credit courses, they have an entire web presence. And in their web presence, they have that discovery page that I showed that has all the social logins, and those are buttons that connect them to the correct URL for logging in. If we get to doing this for other kind of sort of guest accounts, we are going to have a landing page where they can go and find the URL, the discovery page.
We currently have a landing page that has the net ID, which is what the real students go with, and then guest. So then guest prompts them out to us.
Right, we were just, no, you're not doing that. So, but we could come up with a discovery landing page kind of thing. Yes?
Do you have any like 4-H programs or anything that have minors?
We certainly do.
And there haven't been issues with the fact that you're using this federated identity?
The very few 4-H students that we've ever had in the system are signed up by their parents. So it's under the parents' email address, and they just say, I'm the parent, I'm the responsible one for the account. Yeah, I mean, you could really get into a problem if you had minors logging in. Yes?
If a OSU student had a Facebook account with their OSU email,
Mm-hmm.
and then went and tried to provision an account with Facebook,
That doesn't work. They get an error. And we tell them that your choices are either use a different social provider where you have a different email address, or get a different email address, or just use your OSU ID. You can sign up for all these non-credit courses with your OSU ID and just use that. But you're right. If the OSU email address, can't use that in 2 places. One more back here.
Have you had any issue with multiple accounts being created by individuals using Facebook, AOL, and Google, and then when a course invite goes out, since they have to be invited to the course, since they're not a standard enrollment, going to a provisioned account that doesn't allow them to get to the course material?
Yeah, so we do have the occasional problem with people forgetting which social provider they signed up with, and then they'll go and sign up with a different one, and they'll create a new account, and then it's like, but I have to log in with this to do this class, and I have to log in with this other thing to do this class, and we can merge them. There's not a problem with the enrollments, because the enrollments are not done by invitation. They're done as an SIS import. So they don't get an invitation to the course, they just get enrolled. But
Even for non-standard courses,
yeah, that's the ones I'm speaking of.
brought into your registration
Not exactly. We have a separate process. They register for those classes. CSV files are created by the non-credit folks that create the users, and the courses and the logins. They ship those CSV files off to us, and we have a daemon that runs and processes those every 15 minutes, just like an SIS import. But we don't do them as batch, so they're just additive.
But obviously you can't enroll them until they've provisioned the account.
That's right. We run the user's CSV first. I mean, that's just the order of things.
Right.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Before you were using just-in-time provisioning, you were capturing the error, the login error. And how are you doing that? Is that through are the errors being logged in Canvas? Does Canvas store that?
No, the non-credit folks had written a whole registration process that did all that, because they also have to do the payment piece. So they have a piece where they send them off to, I don't even know who their payment person is, but yeah. So I'm actually not using just-in-time provisioning anywhere yet. I just want to.
Okay.
Yeah, I think I'm out of time, so thank you all very much for coming. I thought I was going to be talking to an empty room.